Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. How you doing? It is Tuesday, March the 26th, the year 2024 in the United Corporations of America. What a day. Have a funny little story to share. I'll share that in a little bit. But a lot to get to. Major bridge collapse. You also have big Assange news, which we will start with. Also more just an unbelievable statement from the EPA to us regarding the, what do you call it other than the poisoning of some of the poorest people in America by their water in West Virginia, which we just got back from. This EPA statement was just, I've heard a lot of horrendous shit from the federal and state government. This might as well have been like, yeah, well, tough shit. Good luck to you poisoned Appalachians. So we'll get into that. And if we have time, I want to weigh in on this meltdown over NBC hiring Ronna McDaniel, which now it seems like they might be pulling back from that decision and getting rid of Ronna McDaniel, the former chair of the RNC, after the limousine liberal brigade, Rachel Maddow, Joe Scarborough, Chuck Todd freaked out. So hopefully we can get into all this. Joining me, happy to have him returning, is Steve Grumbine of The Real Progressives and Macro and Cheese. Steve will be here the full hour, but also joining me is Kevin Gosztola from The Dissenter, who I wanted to have on first. I barely saw it covered really in mainstream media before I went to the city. I was shooting some stuff in New York City today. But Kevin, there was Assange news. On one end, he was not, a UK court did not rule today to extradite him. So that's positive. But on the other end, unless I'm misinterpreting it, it doesn't grant him the appeal that him and his lawyers were seeking. It kind of grants him a short-term reprieve and grants the United States what?
Yeah, so let me be clear here. And thank you for having me back on the show. And for those of you who are tuned into Status Coup and are just meeting me for the first time, I've been following this case for several years, over a decade now. And I am very familiar with the way that Chelsea Manning was prosecuted. I covered her court-martial at Fort Meade, and I've continued to follow what's happening in this particular case with Julian Assange. And the High Court of Justice ruled that they did have valid grounds for appeal. But I need to tell you that there were 9 grounds of appeal that were put forward to the court, and only 2.5 of them were accepted. You may say, half, what are you talking about? Well, on the issue of whether his rights to freedom of expression would be violated, they said no. They didn't think that there was any problem or issue when it came to that. They don't see a threat to journalism in this case. However, there is this small issue, which we can get to more in more detail, of the lead prosecutor in this case. His name is Gordon Kromberg, Assistant U.S. Attorney Gordon Kromberg in the Eastern District of Virginia. And he made quite a boneheaded error, mistake, or perhaps he was just being truthful and saying the quiet part out loud. I leave it to you to debate. But he said that if Julian Assange was extradited to the United States, he would not have First Amendment rights, or that the U.S. can go into court and argue that he does not have First Amendment protections. And that alarmed the High Court. And so that is a ground for appeal. Another ground for appeal is the fact that at no point when questioned did the U.S. government or the attorneys representing them assure the court that Julian Assange would not be exposed to the death penalty. Julian Assange has rights when it comes to the death penalty because under UK extradition law, it is a bar. It is a prohibition. You cannot be extradited to a requesting state, handed over to them if you will be exposed to the death penalty. So that's important. I think it's significant, but the biggest problem and the thing that we should probably spend the most time discussing is the fact that this court told the United States government what magic words they need to say so that they can save their extradition case, which is not how I understand courts to work. Usually courts are supposed to be a check on power. They're supposed to be a way of upholding the law or the rights of people. And in this instance, once again, we see the High Court of Justice laying it out there for the US government. If you want to extradite Julian Assange, here's what you have to do. And if you look in their decision, they just say very plainly, tell us you'll give Julian Assange First Amendment protections while he's on trial. Okay, well, that's simple enough. Tell us that you won't impose the death penalty. That's simple enough. And then it all goes away. All the issues just go away.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but correct me if I'm wrong. A jury either convicts or doesn't, and then it's up to a judge to decide on sentencing, life in prison, or a death penalty. So how could the U.S. government decide death penalty or not? Wouldn't that be up to a judge?
No, because in these matters, it's typically about what the U.S. prosecutors seek.
Okay.
So you go into this case. So it's an Espionage Act case. So let's just, based on my experience covering Espionage Act cases. Well, first of all, I've never seen, just to be clear here, the Espionage Act does not carry a death penalty. The concern is, and they said this is valid, that these U.S. prosecutors or these prosecutors representing the U.S. government had no response to the issue of, will you be adding additional charges to this case after he is extradited? What is to stop the U.S. government from accusing Assange of aiding and abetting treason? What is to stop the U.S. government from adding charges of espionage that are not as laid out in the Espionage Act, which when we've dealt with those, we're talking usually about the new way that this Espionage Act is applied, where it particularly goes after government employees or government contractors who leak to the press. But what about the classic form of espionage? What if you decide that you believe Julian Assange was spying against the United States? As we've heard people say, you could find media clips from the last 5 to 10 years of pundits from the liberal class as well as right-wing media saying that they think Julian Assange is a spy for Russia. So what if you add charges after he's extradited? Well, those crimes carry the potential for a death sentence. That's available to prosecutors. So the High Court of Justice wants to know, what are you going to do to assure us that he won't be exposed to the death penalty? And that's their job. And I think it's right that they're asking questions about this. But what I object to is this thing that now everything that we all know that is defective about this extradition request can just disappear if they say the right words to the High Court of Justice. Then Julian Assange has no recourse, no way to protect his rights, and we just have to trust that the U.S. government is going to take good care of him once he's in custody after what they say to the UK High Court. And so that's what we're waiting for. There's a date set, May 20th, that they'll probably have a hearing on these assurances. Like you said, there hasn't really been an appeal granted yet. That's been tabled. Or they say in legal parlance or legal jargon, they say it's been adjourned. The decision was adjourned. So they'll come back to it. If the U.S. doesn't offer satisfactory assurances, then there will be an appeal hearing in Julian Assange's case. And this is terribly confusing for everyone following. I just very quickly, I just want to say this, we're so far afield at this point when it comes to this case. But what is abundantly clear is that the UK legal system is not about to spare Julian Assange. It does not care about the well-being of Julian Assange. This court system has kept Julian Assange in Belmarsh prison for nearly 5 years, denied him bail. They believe that he's a flight risk, even though there's no evidence that he has any interest in fleeing this case against him. I mean, he has a family. He has Stella. He has 2 kids. He would live with his family in the UK and go through this ordeal with them, and not be subjected to cruel and inhuman treatment at Belmarsh prison any longer. And this court continuously allows the U.S. government to misrepresent and lie about what they are doing to Julian Assange. And we see it yet again in this decision today.
And Steve, I don't know if I'm in the twilight zone, if you want to jump in or ask Kevin something. Kevin said there was 2.5 of the 9 appeals granted. Did the high court just kind of ignore the whole CIA assassination? Well, plotting to assassinate and murder him, because that was obviously presented a couple weeks ago. I mean, I don't know. I nothing surprises me anymore about U.S., UK, just the global neoliberal order. But was that addressed at all? Did they just say, well, that's not grounds for an appeal?
I'm smirking. I can barely contain myself, because this is probably one of the most astonishing or absurd aspects of the ruling. And that's really difficult to do, because as I just told you, there's a whole paragraph written that lays out a kind of step-by-step guide for prosecutors to salvage this case and not cost themselves an extradition. Even worse is that the High Court of Justice says that this fresh evidence, though they take it seriously, that the CIA was plotting, these allegations of plotting to kidnap or assassinate Julian Assange, they take this seriously. They say that this is not much different from what was shared with District Judge Vanessa Baretzer before she reviewed the extradition and ruled that all of this surveillance, everything that was being done to Julian Assange while he was in the embassy and the CIA was targeting him, she ruled that it was legitimate because the US government saw him as a national security threat. And they accepted this idea, and it is not based in fact, that Julian Assange was being targeted because the US government was afraid he would flee to Russia. And so because of that, it is justified in the minds of the High Court of Justice to have had this activity on the part of the CIA. But then they go even a step further. They say, guess what? This extradition proceeding actually saves Julian Assange's life, because now the US government is lawfully seeking him, and he no longer has to fear that the CIA will try and kidnap and assassinate him.
Anything from you, Steve?
Yeah, I guess my question to you is this. I mean, this is bigger than Assange. Let's be fair. I mean, anytime you invoke Russia, there's an entire wing of establishment Democrats that just naturally fall in line. Oh my God, Putin this, Putin that. So you got this whole weird vibe going on out there with a nation full of people still dealing with red baiting and still dealing with the anti-Russia stuff. And it's disgusting, really. But here we go. It's now coming into this role where they're going to try and use that kind of weird, perverse, Hillary lost to Trump because of Russia, Bernie, buff Bernie, Russia, Putin, Russia. And now they're going to tie Assange to it. It's just amazing to me the level of stupidity that Americans will go through to be in alignment with corporate media and to go along with the Democratic Party narratives. What are your thoughts in terms of this kind of like red baiting overall? I mean, it is a true red bait. To even tie this to Russia is just beyond me.
Yeah, and it troubles me, but it has dogged Julian Assange for almost 10 years now. It's last 8 years, going all the way back to 2016 when the Clinton campaign emails were published. And even though every liberal was apoplectic and they enlisted and put all their faith in Special Counsel Robert Mueller to come up with some kind of charges against the people who they believed were colluding, Trump officials and Russian intelligence agents, there was never any evidence that was uncovered against Julian Assange. And it said clearly in documents that have been either obtained through Freedom of Information requests or in the investigation itself that was released, that they could not substantiate the claims that were being made against Assange when they suggested that he was conspiring with, intelligence cutouts or whatever espionage farce or tragedy you wanted to conjure up that they were talking about. They found no evidence that he did anything more than receive these documents, authenticate them, determine that there was newsworthy information, they were factual, and they published them. And just to refresh everyone's memory, but I know your followers and listeners and viewers understand that we are talking about showing that the Democratic National Committee will rig their primary process in favor of the candidate in which they would like to anoint as the Democratic Party's nominee, so that people who run in the Democratic Party cannot beat individuals with said names like Clinton or Obama or Biden or whomever they dub as the person they want to be their heir to the Democratic throne. So, but look, this article, the Yahoo News report that gave us all these details and a lot of narrative and our understanding of what CIA Director Mike Pompeo and the Trump administration were plotting to do against Assange, has an issue in it that has now reared its ugly head and is impacting Julian Assange, because these operatives that worked for a private security company called UC Global and the U.S. intelligence agencies that there's evidence out there conspiring with them or leaning on them or receiving information from them, were crafting this idea or notion that Julian Assange was going to flee to Russia and was going to obtain a kind of like diplomatic passport that would make it possible for him to leave the Ecuador embassy. But the problem with that is that the reporters who did this story got it wrong, and it's impacting Julian Assange. Michael Isikoff, who actually did a fair amount of Russiagate reporting that ended up having to disown later. And then Zach Dorfman and Sean Naylor worked on this article for Yahoo News. And I like everything about it, but I usually ignore the Russia stuff up until today because there's not a lot of validity to it. But now I have to address it. And I have to address it because they got wrong the aspect of they didn't represent that the Ecuador government was pressuring Julian Assange and that there were rogue officers that were trying to set Julian Assange up because they wanted to get rid of him. They didn't want him in the embassy anymore. And so in 2017, about this time when a lot of the developments start occurring where he is trying to make a break for some country, there was an officer who came with this idea of getting a Russian diplomatic passport. And his attorney said, oh, no, we never asked for that. We don't want that. Do you see what's happening in the United States? We know there's all this Russiagate hysteria. Do you think we want to sabotage ourselves or make things even more difficult for us by having him go to Russia? No, we want a diplomatic passport for, say, like Bolivia or Colombia or Venezuela or some Latin American country. So give us that. Don't come to us with a diplomatic passport to Russia. But because this was all documented through surveillance, they ended up convincing themselves that there was going to be some kind of Russian vehicle that would show up. And that's where you get this really nutball scenario painted in the Yahoo News report where they say that the UK government was asked it was like, are you willing to shoot the tires out of a diplomatic van from Russia if it comes to pick up Julian Assange from the embassy or would you? Yeah. And it's just, like Tom Clancy style stuff or Jack Ryan style stuff in there. And, but this is a real legitimate issue, the way in which Julian Assange has been smeared and this idea that he is some kind of like Russian plant. And the High Court of Justice doesn't question any of these ideas. They just say, this is what the judge concluded. So there's no reason for us to question how she connected the facts, which, by the way, are misrepresentations on the part of the U.S. government to make it easier to extradite Julian.
Kevin, my last question, and we're going to have you on again for a little bit longer. But last question. Beyond Julian Assange, obviously this is about Julian Assange, freedom of the press, whatever's left of the press in America, because it's garbage in my opinion. But to me, something that I think I'm learning here, for all of the right and understandable talk about the joke of a criminal justice system in America, I'm beginning to see that we might just have one global justice system, and it's one global injustice system. Because like we're seeing with essentially the United States kind of twisting itself into human pretzels to, on one hand, be like, no Israel, bad Israel, but here's the checkbook. On the other end, the UK, it just seems like they're basically a larger client state for the United States in this respect.
Yes.
And they're just rubber stamping. This isn't a real, it does, even when Judge Barrister originally ruled against extraditing him, it wasn't on the merits of freedom of the press, that there's no evidence that he hacked anything. It was on, well, he might commit suicide, kind of like a technicality. But in this case, it just seems like it's a show trial or show considering an appeal, and they're just bending over backwards for the US, which tells me we're not seeing independent legal systems in sovereign countries. We're just seeing one connected, corrupt system.
That's a very good observation. And that's a really good place to leave our discussion of Assange. And I'll be brief in my response to your question or comment. But this is part of the WikiLeaks revelations. This is part of what Chelsea Manning gifted us and exposed about our US empire. You may recall that we learned the extent to which Obama and Bush officials were going to make sure that nobody was held accountable for torture. And they were intervening in Spain and Italy and Germany and making sure that those countries did not independently pursue investigations. There was an individual who was abducted, kidnapped, sent to Afghanistan, tortured, and then returned home. And he tried to get some kind of justice, but the German prosecutors were thwarted by pressure from the United States. And so that's just an example of what you're saying. It's become very clear that this legal system in the UK, I don't call it a justice system, I say a legal system, because they're just kind of going about their business and they do the bidding of the United States. And as we're seeing what they do, I'm also observing over the last 5 years that the UK is becoming tremendously right-wing, much like this country has gone through a transformation. We're seeing in the United Kingdom, while they're prosecuting Julian Assange, bills that criminalize whistleblowers, bills that'll make it easier to stop journalists from publishing information they obtain on abuses of national security powers, bills to keep protesters off the street who might be protesting for climate change or challenging the war on Gaza, bills, Rishi Sunak and company trying to keep people from acting independently. Labor, the Labor Party there has the same problems and maybe even worse than the Democratic Party in the way that they go after lefty or progressives and try to smear them as anti-Semitic to make it so they are ineffective and unable to do the organizing that they want to do on issues. Look what Jeremy Corbyn went through, and he's one of the most prominent supporters of Julian Assange in the United Kingdom. And so you hit it. You've got it. The right thing to look at is how this global system has been controlled by the United States. And we see countries become client states. They're effectively deputized to make sure that the U.S. government gets the results that they desire. And in this particular case, they're seeking a journalist in one of the most unprecedented cases in the history of the world. And its impact is doing untold damage to the institution of freedom of the press that is underappreciated and is not challenged enough regularly by journalists here in this country. And that's to their detriment. I'll close with this because I feel it, you feel it. We work in this profession as journalists. We see all these stories about people getting laid off We see the lack of resources for reporting. We see that there are fewer and fewer jobs available. It's harder for us to do the work that we want to do. We're fractured. It's harder to access our audience. And meanwhile, the thing that we should all come together, and I mean, I think even elite journalists, liberal limousine, liberal elite journalists should recognize is that like, if you even want to continue to do this in your profession, you need to be concerned about how you're going to be politically attacked at some point by the US government if you continue to allow it to amass power to target journalists. And if you don't think Joe Biden will do it, well, then a senile Joe Biden or a Democratic Party that doesn't appreciate the threats from Republicans is going to walk us right back into another Trump administration or a right-wing administration where they use these powers, and they will, maybe they won't come after me or you because they don't care that much about us. They don't know what we do, but they're going to go after the people who work at CNN, the people who work at New York Times, the people who work at NBC News who don't want Ronna McDaniel working for them, or they're going to go after all these people. And then finally, we're going to hear them crying. They're going to be wailing. They're going to want our support. And it's going to be really difficult for us because in a time when we wanted them to stand up for press freedom and could have done something about it, they didn't want to join this fight.
And just so we know the logistics, does the UK court gave the US 3 weeks to present that they would not issue the death penalty? What's the next steps?
Middle of April. It's like April 14th, I think. And
Okay.
then there is a hearing scheduled on May 20th. So people who are engaged with this, look forward to May 20th. And then if I can just give one quick call to action, the Assange Defense Committee and others like myself who really do care about this, we are focused on the House Resolution 934. This is what his brother Gabriel Shipton and Stella Assange and others are fighting for. They want representatives in Congress to put their name on this. It's a resolution that says, if you support freedom of the press, then you must demand that the Justice Department drop the charges against Julian Assange. It's very simple. So just if anybody has any interest in doing anything meaningful, write, call, do whatever you think you can to contact people in Congress and tell them that you want them on there. And then if you do find that your representative is already on this resolution, thank them because they are doing the right thing and they deserve credit for being there. There's only like 15 or 16 people on it. There's a long way to go. But this is one small way that we can apply pressure. And, we need to do whatever we can to try and spare Julian Assange.
And where can people find your work? And by the way, if you don't know, Kevin's been the top mainstream or independent covering this ridiculous saga for over a year, including waking up at, God knows, 3 a.m. American time to cover the proceedings there. Where can people find your work?
Yeah. Being up at 3 a.m. that goes back to like 2021. So, or 2020. Gosh, wow. I mean, if I've gone through this, think about Julian Assange. It's 90 times worse. Go to thedissenter.org. There's consistent reporting on whistleblowers, press freedom, and government secrecy. And in particular, it's a hub for updates on the Julian Assange case. So thank you, Jordan. And thank you, Steve.
Thanks, man. Be well. All right. We'll try to get through a bunch of topics. First is our first show with Steve, since unfortunately you lost your mother. So condolences from the Coup family. I know that you were a mama's boy, and from what you told me, she was just an incredible woman. So, sending my love, and kind of puts things into perspective, I guess, how short life is, and you gotta love the ones you got while you got it. I don't know if you wanted to say anything before we move on.
No, I just appreciate it. It's been hard.
Yeah.
She was my rock. I was a mama's boy, a proud mama's boy. And, I got to be there the whole time. You know what I mean? So for me, it's been bittersweet, but had one of the things, I'll leave it with this, her celebration of life. I got there and people that I expected to see there weren't there, but the room was jam-packed. And I was like, wow, who are all these people? And they were people that would go into my mom's line. My mom in retirement ran the cash register at a Target. And she was so kind to so many people that people from many, many years ago that would go to her line came to her celebration of life just to tell how the little interactions they had with her impacted their life so much and that they'll never forget her. And to me, that was one of those things where it was like, wow, all right, thank God, you know? So
Wow,
anyway,
that's amazing. That's
a
awesome.
nice feeling. Yeah. So I try to get my
Glad
mic
to
a
hear.
little louder if I'm quiet there.
And
you hear me okay?
yeah, I hear you. I going to try to speed through a few things. I don't want to sound like I don't care about the bridge. I've been running around all day and I don't know much about this bridge collapse other than a ship knocked into the bridge. Tragedy. Right now, from what I'm reading, there's still 6 or 7 people unaccounted for. But I'd like to ask you, Steve, this to me, a tragedy, but also there seems to be a discrepancy here because President Biden, well, let's first, Colin, if you have any part of what Biden said.
The bridge is also critical for travel, not just for Baltimore, but for the Northeast Corridor. Over 30,000 vehicles cross the Francis Scott Key Bridge on a daily basis. It's virtually, it's one of the most important elements for the economy in the Northeast and the quality of life. My transportation secretary is there now. As I told Governor Moore, I've directed my team to move heaven and earth to reopen the port and rebuild the bridge as soon as humanly possible. And we're going to work hand in hand with the support of Maryland to support Maryland and whatever they ask for. We're going to work with our partners in Congress to make sure the state gets the support it needs. It's my intention that federal government will pay for the entire cost of reconstructing that bridge. And I expect the Congress to support my effort. This is going to take some time. The people of Baltimore can count on us, though, to stick with them at every step of the way until the port is reopened and the bridge is rebuilt.
So again, the bridge and anyone who's lost their lives or is missing, 100%. Clearly, we feel terrible about that. It seems that it was a legitimate accident. But what I'm not getting, I haven't heard one person ask, Steve, how are you going to pay for this? How are we going to pay for this? Rebuilding a bridge, I mean, that is hundreds of millions, if not billion or dollars.
Yeah.
Apparently,
it's a lot of money one way or the other, right?
When they want to do something, they just have a wand to do it.
Yeah, it just, I think it's frustrating, for people to always see negative things get funded and never understand why positive things can't be funded. And they ask the questions of, how can we have money for war, but we don't have money for education or whatever? And this is a perfectly legitimate expense that the federal government should, in fact, cover without any problem at all. Zero. Just like they should have done it for East Palestine, just like they should have done it for Flint. Each of these things, the federal government could have done exactly what Joe Biden said. I think I told you this way back when you first started talking to me about your coverage of Flint. And I said, you know what's really frustrating about all this? Is the fact that this could be a giant nothing burger taken care of immediately. The federal government could easily do this. And unfortunately, people think it's their hard-earned tax dollars paying for it. I swear to God, it's going to hit. It's going to stick someday that the government is the currency creator, currency issuer. And that's why Biden can say that with absolute certainty. There's no amount of tax dollars required. It is literally always, just like the money spent in Israel is not your tax dollars. Sorry, folks. Sorry, Nina Turner. I know you like to say it, but it ain't your tax dollars. It's just freaking, they're going to spend it. They're going to create it. They're going to put it in a bill, and it'll get spent into existence. That's how money gets in the economy. And no matter what, no matter how many conspiracy things and dumb things people say, in the end, our government can do it all. It literally can do it all. And when it says it can't, or where we're going to find the money, it's literally class war. It is literally class war. If this hasn't sunk in, nothing will make it sink in. It's got to someday sink in, because Joe Biden, what he's saying right now, could have been done with a stroke of a pen, eliminating all student debt. It could have been so many things could be done Like Haiti, rebuilding Haiti. If they wanted to rebuild Haiti, they're going to rebuild Haiti without going to vultures. They could have done the same thing for Puerto Rico. Boom, right away. Hurricane, no problem. We're right there. Sandy, what was the beach up there in New Jersey? The one that got tore up. Instantly, the federal government could have wiped it out. No problem. But unfortunately, we've been conditioned to believe that the government can't do that, and the Rothschilds and other dumb things that keep us sidelined from being effective.
Well,
but I think it's even deeper than that, though.
What I found amazing about this, again, to me, correct me if I'm wrong, what is the difference in terms of urgent emergency between we got to rebuild this bridge and the federal government's going to pay for this, and I have cancer and need health care? What's the difference? There is
the
no
big difference is one of them is facilitating capitalism.
Right. I was about to say, in this case, this is what I think one of the biggest ports in the world, and the economy, yes, average people could be hurt, but more so the corporations and the corporate entities will be hurt if they don't rebuild this port, rebuild this bridge. So in this case, we could wave a wand because the economy, i.e. the corporations, they will be hurt. But in terms of the federal government can't pay for healthcare because that's just you. It doesn't really affect everybody else, even though it does, to be clear, where it's all interconnected. So it just seems to me they have the magic wand. It's just what they see as urgent emergencies. It was like in the beginning of COVID when Biden said during the debate, he ended up lying about it. COVID treatment's going to be free. And I forget who it was, but somebody said, well, why is it? Maybe it was Brianna Joy Gray. Well, yes, COVID treatment should be free, but why is COVID treatment considered the federal government will pay for it, but like cancer is not an equally emergent? It doesn't make sense. Putting aside the moral dimensions, it doesn't make any sense. And it makes sense from what you're saying. To them, there's an urgency where we don't even fathom how you're going to pay for it. No one's going to ask that. The media is not going to ask for it. The politicians who say that on Democratic Party debate stages aren't going to ask that because just understood that we can't hurt the capitalist class. But for everything else that actually affects individuals and families,
That's right. I mean, just understand this. The government, we believe it because we want to believe it. And that's why you'll vote in November or whatever. You'll vote at all these things, and you go through the process to legitimize the oligarch Olympics. You'll do these things, though you know that it's placebo voting. You know that nothing will fundamentally change. You know that regardless of whether the people want Israel funded for genocide, it's going to happen because it's not a democracy, never really was a democracy. And literally, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, maybe a legal scholar, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that this country was founded on wealthy, rich freaking white landowners. And they have never given up power. It has always been there. And the founding documents only secure private property, which is what they were concerned of. So this is built on for hundreds of years, and it isn't changing now because still there are people that will lick that boot. They will stay tongue glued to the boot to make sure that, no, that's our hard-earned tax dollars. No, no, no. And ultimately, this whole thing, it's really painful because you believe that your government is there to serve you, and it should be. I mean, that's what we want. That's what the government of, by, and for the people should be, but that's not what we have. No matter whether you go and you get the sticker in your forehead that says, I voted, nothing. It's not a real democracy. It never was, okay? And so all these questions you have are good questions, but they're not for this government. This government's job is to protect capital. It will always protect capital. It will always protect the wealthy, okay? It will always do that because that's what it was designed to do. Even the police that we talk about, they were there simply to crack the police in this country started by cracking down on coal miner strikes in Pennsylvania, for God's sakes. It was never about protecting and serving. It was always about protecting capital to ensure capital wins. And nothing has changed at all. And so if they gave you health care, Jordan, if they gave me health care, if they gave us all universal basic services, gave us a house to live in, give us clothes on our back, What would the capitalists do to get our labor? What would they do to extract our surplus, our work? What would they do? They would have nothing because we would be content. But because we're not content, because they keep us in precarity, they can pick us up for on the cheap. And that is what the government is there to do. And on one hand, AOC, how long did it take AOC to finally talk about genocide? How many 15,000 dead Palestinian children? And okay, now we can talk. Okay, nothing, they're still funding the same shit. Very sternly worded tweets and getting on TV, sternly wording stuff. Nothing is changing. It's not going to change. And so to me, when you look at this and you understand that that bridge facilitates capitalism, facilitates trade, okay, that is why it's getting the attention, okay?
Right.
It is not there to serve you. So it doesn't mean a government could not serve us, because I am a big planning, big central guy. I believe in government, but not this government. This government is truly not representative of the people.
Well,
and it's painful to watch people who still believe, because it's like you end up with adversaries trying to convince them that their lying eyes are really seeing what they're seeing.
Because it's not a government. It's the United Corporations of America. It's not a government. It's not a government. Get your United Corporations of America shirt, statuscoup.com/store. Moving on, great segue. You brought up coal. And we'll stay on the bridge issue over the next few days. But, Steve, I got to tell you, you and I have talked on the phone. We've talked via text. I am dejected. I feel dejected. Obviously, I'm not going through what you're going through right now with loss. But I feel I just don't know anymore. We were down in Flint. It's still a fucking disaster. Nobody's covering it. I mean, we're going to do a documentary on the 10-year anniversary. Maybe that will get somewhere. Who knows? Then we're in West Virginia. I mean, literally just poor Appalachians are being poisoned for over a year. Federal government not doing anything. State government not doing anything. Local government not doing anything. Media not doing anything. Literally, there's green fungus looking shit growing in the water that people drink and bathe in there. Literally, there's white stringy particles. Literally, it smells like rotten eggs times 10. You got what I just covered, a sequence of for over a year, people coming in, diarrhea, vomiting, nausea, headaches, rapid weight loss. Now suddenly people are dying, mysterious illnesses, animals dropping dead, deer, roosters, cats, fish, no fish to be had in the creeks. So I reached out to the West Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. They give me a long novel saying a bunch of nothing and lying that we're in compliance. Our testing shows we're in compliance. That's what the state of Michigan and the EPA said about Flint's water for 2 years before they couldn't lie anymore. So I said, you know what? Let me take a whirl. I'll reach out to the EPA. The EPA might as well have responded, SOL. You're on your own, West Virginia. And I don't want to hear from people because I've seen the comments. Oh, well, you get what you voted for because this is Trump country. First of all, I don't care if you're liberal, conservative, glow in the dark, politically agnostic. You don't deserve to be poisoned by your government, regardless of who you vote for. Secondly, why have a federal government if they're not going to do anything? I don't know if obviously you've been busy, but I don't know if you got to see any of our coverage, but literally we're showing shit that looks like it's out of the Joker movie. Colin, whatever you have, if you have the green fungus, if you have the white shit, whatever you have to show, just let me know when it's ready. But I reached out to the EPA. Let's see what the EPA had to say about this. Colin, put that up. We are aware of the situation in Wyoming County at Indian Creek and are in communication with the state about these concerns. While EPA has program oversight and enforcement roles for drinking water and water quality programs under the Safe Drinking Water Act and Clean Water Act, the state has primacy for these programs and directly administers them. EPA does not regulate private wells under the Safe Drinking Water Act. We recommend reaching out to the West Virginia Department of Health on drinking water and human health issues, and the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection for more information about water quality issues. We will be checking in with both state departments to help as needed. If you need context for either, I'd be happy to provide them to you. Well, this is not an issue that's been going on for 2 weeks. It's not an issue that's been going on for a month, 6 months. This started in February 2023. I didn't know about it until recently. I got a lot of people reaching out to me about a lot of things, but this has been going on for over a year. And their independent testing has shown high lead, high arsenic, high manganese, high iron. There's also independent testing that has shown industrial cleaner that shows up as foam, which a lot of the symptoms, it's called surfactants. A lot of those symptoms match what the influx of people going in with diarrhea and GI issues. Thanks, Colin. So that's some of that white foam. We've shown green fungi. We've shown white stringy particles that look like it's like some type of living organism is growing in the water. There's been brown, orange water. Here's some of that white stringy stuff. And the EPA basically says, hey, we're just the federal government, but, the bullshit laws, we're not, it's not our responsibility for well water. And the state has primacy. Why have a federal government? We already know the state environmental department is corrupt. It is essentially purchased by the coal industry in West Virginia. Hey, you want to expand it beyond West Virginia? The state of Michigan's environmental department was in on the cover-up that poisoned Flint, which will be revealed in my book coming out this summer. I mean, I could go down the list. The Ohio EPA is helping covering up mini Chernobyl in East Palestine. So if the state environmental departments have been sold out to the special interests and industry, whether it's the railroads or the coal mining industry or what have you, the EPA is just going to hide behind, well, under the Safe Drinking Water Act, we are not the regulatory agency that overlooks well water. Then what the fuck are you doing? Am I being dramatic or unreasonable, Steve?
No, I think, get past the well water for a minute. These are streams. I mean, wells are fed by underwater creeks, streams, whatever you want to call it.
Aquifer.
So that right there, what's that?
Well, what happened here was the aquifer, which is how you get your well water, was breached by the coal miners. So the coal mining, they breached the aquifer, thus contaminating the wells. But those creeks are feeding into the Ohio River. So this is not just a West Virginia issue.
Yes, that's
this
what
is
I'm
feeding
saying.
Right.
Abso-freaking-lutely. I mean, bottom line here is I think this is the most painful part, right? As you untangle what this capitalist system is, and you untangle the government's, the federal government, being that it spends the money into existence, it also controls all the laws and stuff. At the end of the day, it sets the stage for all these markets. It creates the environments for all these things, and it turns its blind eye when it wants to, and then it tries to go after guys like Assange on the other, right? So you understand that anything that in any way, shape, or form impacts the flow of money, of capital's desires, it's going to turn its head the other way. And who is going to bear the most brunt of this if they flipped it on its head? It'd be someone like Joe Manchin. It would be one of the coal barons down there. It would be somebody that is not going to be one of the ones that goes down. You know what I mean? It's one of the good old boys that's part of this thing who they're there to protect. So naturally, the idea here is, hey, I can't do anything about it. It's not my territory. It's not my job. Not our role. And ultimately, you'll get the finger pointing, but all that's just theatrics. The bottom line is they're not there to help. That's not what they're there to do, period. And you feel like a conspiracy theorist when you say this stuff, but it's not. It's right there in plain sight. This isn't like some Rothschild running around playing with long fingers and a caricature of a nose and all the other evil shit they do. This is like right there in your face. The fact that they don't give a fuck. They're not there to give a fuck. They're there to manage and provide for capital. That's it. Period. Full stop.
And I gotta say, I mean, at the end of the day, 15 million people get their water from well water in America. 15
I'm
million
one of 'em.
people. Right. So, and by the way, there's a lot of water problems in America, and a lot of it's city water. So it's not just well water. The city water that residents get from West Virginia has a lot of contamination issues also. But I think what people need to understand, because you get a lot of marketing and bullshit from the media, and Biden's infrastructure deal is going to replace lead service lines across America. No, it's not. And people don't realize how basically most of these laws are written by the lobbyists and the special interests. Why doesn't the Safe Drinking Water Act cover 15 million people on well water? Why doesn't the Safe Drinking Water Act, by the way, it only mandates entities like in Michigan, West Virginia, to only really test for 4 things. So the West Virginia State Department of Environmental Protection went down there and they only tested for 4 things. They weren't testing for byproducts that would come from mining. They weren't testing from byproducts that would come from capping gas wells the wrong way. They weren't testing for byproducts that would come from, surfactants. They're only testing. They test for chlorine, lead, and a couple other things. So they could say, hey, it's meeting our standards because we're not actually testing for petrochemicals that are in the water or contaminated mining water from a coal mine and all the byproducts that come from coal mine. I remember, I'll never forget this. After the former governor of Michigan's consigliere, basically, and this is in my book, it's the first chapter, after he tried to pay off a sick Flint couple by covering their medical treatment, they invited this sick Flint couple to the state environmental water department, to the lab. And there was this shiny little machine with all these fancy buttons. And the couple asked, oh, what's this? And the lab supervisor from the state of Michigan said, oh, this machine, we could test for everything on the periodic table of elements. And the couple was relieved. Oh, I'm glad you're testing for, you're being thorough. Oh, no, we don't actually use this. We only test for 4 things. But we have the actual equipment to test for everything. But the laws only mandate us to test for, A, B, C, D. That's what's going on all over America. And I'm seeing comments under our West Virginia videos, the ones that are being seen, because YouTube won't share any of them. But I digress. I used to work, I was a pipe fitter for 30 years. We were told just dump the chemicals in creeks and streams. This is very common, folks. In this case, I don't have proof yet, but I believe the coal miners accidentally probably breached the aquifer. And then the environmental department just said, dump it in the creek. Who cares about these poor fucks? I'm paraphrasing. It would be great if I had that on tape. But that's basically what's happening here. And you got, in their view, the environmental department and the coal executives, this is Appalachia, dumb rednecks, whatever. This is one of the poorest communities in America, and people are sick. I talked to a woman who literally has lost her voice for 9 months from inhaling this horrid smell of this water. Just John and I being in her yard. It is overpowering, the stench, and you smell it in her bedroom, in her home. Her garage was flooded by that contaminated creek water. Her house is uninhabitable. She can't go anywhere because she's poor. I spoke with another woman, her and her son, horrible diarrhea. Spoke with another man, 20 roosters have died. His 2 dogs have died. They can't even, as soon as the animals are sick, can't even take them to the vet. They're already dead within a day. And by the way, animals, that's one of the first signs. If you ever saw the movie Dark Waters, which Mark Ruffalo played the lawyer that went after DuPont, I believe it was. One of the first signs of water contamination is the cows are dying and the horses are dying. We have a water crisis in this country and the media doesn't give a fuck. Maybe they'll care when their water starts getting poisoned, but what do they care? They'll just buy Fiji water. It just infuriates me. And I got to tell you, Steve, we've talked about it off camera. It's very dispiriting when you're on the ground, I believe, doing some of the most important work on I don't know a bigger story than water because I don't know a more essential need than water. If we don't have clean water, if we don't have water, you're done as humans. But I can't get it out. I can't get bigger media to care. I can't even get independent media to care. Fortunately, Breaking Points is going to post one of our videos through our partnership. But other than that, YouTube, through its fucking fakakta rigged algorithm, will not recommend any of these videos. So we're out there on the ground. And frankly, I'm going to be honest, we can't continue spending thousands of dollars to cover these stories on the ground if we can't get it to new eyeballs that could then support the work. So I know I'm going on tangents, but it's very, very frustrating.
No, it is. And it's terribly frustrating because I think most people don't really realize how vital it is to share the content, number one. Just a stupid algorithms. It's a game. It's the game we have to play to get content out there, you know? But I think one of the big things is you brought up Chernobyl earlier, and I think it's really important. I'm not going to let that one go. I've been on a big time kind of run with Valery Legosov, who is the hero, if you will, of Chernobyl, who showed how the Soviets cut corners and literally screwed themselves by creating a system that had a failsafe that was literally absolutely like creating a bomb. And you know, they would have shut this guy down if it weren't for the fact that he ended up killing himself. I hate to say this, but it's like we've got to find people that are willing to lay on the sword, that are willing to be, I hate to say sacrificial. I'm not calling for people to self-immolate, but I'm calling for people to be willing to do more than just put that little stupid sticker in your forehead and say you voted. Because if we don't have whistleblowers, if we don't have people that are willing to really, really put it on the line, we've got nothing, because they are proving time and again, these things are going to continue happening, Jordan. And thank God you're covering it. But I hate to break it to you. What's going to happen? What you've exposed it. You've taken it to the EPA. You're telling you, go
Nothing.
talk to Manchin, see if he can hook you up. I mean, nothing.
I'll tell you what's going to
What do we
happen,
do?
Steve. It's what's happening. Bottom line, we have a water crisis, and all over the country, we are starting to get the building blocks of tens of millions, possibly 100, possibly half of America, if not more, getting cancer over the next 15 to 30 years. That's what's going to happen. I'm sorry to be alarmist, but if you have water problems all over the country, if you have PFAS, which are the forever chemicals that are all over the place, including in streams, rivers, if you have things like this, Indian Creek in West Virginia, contaminated, then flowing into the Ohio River, which, by the way, serves 5 million people their drinking water, you're not going to get cancer right away. You might not get sick right away, but you're going to bathe and drink that water, and you might either get cancer or have other issues in the next decade or two. Also, let's be clear, we also have oil pipelines underwater. Standing Rock Native Americans they were not only protesting because it was their land, they were protesting because that pipeline 90 feet under the Missouri River streams down and serves 20 million people. And that is already leaked, by the way. So this is not going to be a crisis in the terms of a bridge collapsing that you could see right now, or a train exploding over East Palestine that you could see right now. This is going to be a slow-moving funeral procession. And when people are getting cancers for which they have no family history and they were previously healthy, they're going to be scratching their head. Bad luck. No, it's not bad luck. I mean, healthy people can get cancer, of course. But the point is, this shit, you don't know what's in your water, and it's going to cause cancer and a lot of other things for people all over this country. That's why I cover it. But I got to tell you, I mean, John and I were on the road, and I feel like I'm just, at a certain point, you're just ramming your head against the wall. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm covering the right things, but I cannot break through. And it's also, I mean, this trip in particular between Flint, West Virginia, and I'm paying Ty, our original cameraman, to produce the documentary for Flint. I mean, it cost us over $6,000. I mean, we lost probably $5,000 on this trip. That's not sustainable. I don't have fucking, whoever's left, whether it's George Soros or the remaining Koch brother or name your Neanderthal corporate villain funding all the rest of the media. I don't have them, and I don't want them, but I can't continue funding it if we don't grow. So to the however many, less than 200 people on YouTube watching, if you're not yet a member and you value this reporting, please support us, statuscoup.com/join. It's really legitimately the only way we could continue funding this stuff. I'd like to go back to West Virginia. I'd like to dig into this further, but it's just, I mean, just 2 flights cost us $1,000 to West Virginia. People don't realize how expensive. I mean, the rent-a-car is $500. The hotels, so, it's just this is part of why most outlets don't do this kind of reporting, and they don't care. But Steve, you got 5 more minutes?
I got 5 more minutes.
All right. I've been burning to cover this. As you know, and the media is hyperventilating about this because this involves them. But NBC News hired Ronna McDaniels, who to me is insignificant. She's just another, soulless, craven Republican who's basically sold her soul for Trump. She was the RNC chair. I guess she was involved with his election fraud, stop the steal bullshit. And NBC News hired her. And as a result, the NBC, MSNBC flock revolted. Colin, let's show.
Instance, NBC News, either wittingly or unwittingly, is teaching election deniers that what they can do stretches well beyond appearing on our air in interviews to peddle lies about the sanctity and integrity of our elections, which Ronna McDaniels did yesterday on Meet the Press. What we've also said to election deniers is not just they can do that on our airwaves, but that they can do that as one of us, as badge-carrying employees of NBC News, as paid contributors to our sacred airwaves.
One of the entities that helped Donald Trump push these lies was the Republican National Committee, the RNC, which is the official arm of the Republican Party. They're the ones that attacked Republicans like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger for investigating the assault on January 6th by accusing them of persecution of ordinary citizens engaged in legitimate political discourse. For the last 7 years, until about a month ago, the chair of the RNC was Ronna Romney McDaniel. She dropped the Romney from her name, apparently, because Donald Trump hates Mitt Romney for voting to convict him in both of his impeachments. And Ronna is Mitt Romney's niece. She is also, as of last week, a very, very well-paid contributor to NBC News, something that has alarmed many of us in this company. Ronna McDaniel, who now works for a news organization, apparently still believes, or at least is still unwilling to stop saying, that expanding absentee voting during a global deadly pandemic is election fraud and theft.
It's my understanding that MSNBC's leadership did not object to Ronna McDaniel being hired by NBC News when the matter first arose. But when the hiring was announced and MSNBC staff essentially unanimously and instantly expressed outrage, our leadership at MSNBC heard us, understood, and adjusted course. We were told this weekend in clear terms.
That's good, Colin. Sorry, Colin got more, but I know you only have a few minutes. I got to say, putting aside Ronna McDaniel, because in a vacuum, no, I wouldn't pay her to be on NBC News. She's an election denier. Not only that, but what is she bringing to the table that you should pay her $300,000 a year, which was her reported contract with them, while you're laying off journalists around the country. But they didn't have a problem with hiring Nicole Wallace, who was one of George W. Bush's lackeys. She was his press secretary or communications director after he lied us into a war. No problem with that. Literally, they were negotiating with Jen Psaki to be a host on MSNBC while she was Biden's press secretary. MSNBC literally has ex-Bushies and Iraq warmongers lying in their green room, sleeping on cots, like Bill Kristol and David Frum. CNN, we could go down the list of the contributors they have. So on one end, election denial and stop the steal is where they draw the line. But if you were a warmonger for Iraq who's never atoned, we'll give you a primetime show. I mean, I could go down. It just seems like there is a really, really selective outrage when it comes to who can have our, what did she say, our sacred air, and who cannot.
I mean, these are the same people that pretended like there's not a genocide going on in Palestine. These are the same people that act like, Russia was what cost Hillary the election. These are the same people that literally just suck the life out of this country. And they come off as the grown-ups in the room because they're the shit libs, vote blue sycophants. And honest to God, I don't give a flying fuck what they have to say. I can't watch them for 5 minutes. The shit that comes out of their mouths is ridiculous. And to act like they're protecting this, I don't know anything about Ron. I don't care. Okay. The Republicans are what they are. But in fairness, remember this little shit show at the bottom. Go back to your reporting about West Virginia and the EPA. Who gives a shit? It's theater, man. It's theater. And them acting outraged. Oh, this is all about maintaining this shit lib versus the MAGA kind of thing. They're trying to maintain this little weird kind of perversion that obfuscates the fact that they're both capitalist pigs and that they're all doing the exact same thing, and they lie like a rug, and they're there to misrepresent the truth so that we sit there and bitch. I mean, think about how many people don't know a goddamn thing about geopolitics, but are out there nonstop talking about people being Putin puppets. Think about the kind of lowbrow, low intellect, low info kind of people that these people feed on a daily basis. And they're going to talk about like this is like something they're protecting, like they're the good guys. It's just, I can't even take it seriously. I mean, I watch this and just hearing Maddow speak caused me to throw up in my mouth a little. I mean, it's just, they're repulsive people. It's disgusting.
And I'll add one more thing before we let you go. Colin had a clip, but we didn't show it. Ugh, Joe and Mrs. Joe Scarborough were melting down about this. These were the same people that had Donald Trump on Morning Joe in 2015, almost on a daily basis, calling in his PJs after he created the birther movement that Obama wasn't, really born here. Whatever you think of Obama, I'm not a fan. That was obviously bullshit and racist and nativist. Morning Joe is glad to have him on. So is the red line? We could have people on that are racist or lie if they're unpaid. But if they're paid, then we need to fucking melt down. That's really what's going on here. Yeah, we could have ex-press secretaries, former communications director. We could have that revolving door between DC and media flipping wide open. As long as they're not paid, it's fine if we just have 24/7 propaganda and people lying. But if we're going to pay them, particularly election deniers, that's where we draw the line and need to hyperventilate about our sacred air. To be clear, I'm with them. You shouldn't have hired this fucking asshole. She was involved with trying to steal the election. She is a Trump lackey, but the problem is the messengers. They're right about her. The problem is the messengers. You're all hacks. You're all propagandists. You're all phony. You're all you all, not you, Steve, them, are the reason that most people don't even know Flint doesn't have clean water. Most people don't know that Appalachia is being poisoned right now. Most people don't know that Norfolk Southern intentionally detonated a nuclear fucking chemical bomb over Ohio and Pennsylvania because these people want to distract us with this bullshit. I digress. Steve, I know you got to go. Tell the people where they can find your work.
Well, I want to just tackle, I'll apologize to my wife for going a little longer because I think this is worth saying. When I think about the Democratic Party, and I am still a registered Democrat, but I don't intend to exercise my right to vote anymore. I don't intend to contribute to legitimizing the system any longer. Because when I think about what is going on, and I think about the fact that, hey, they're talking about stealing the election. Okay, well, Biden's in there. He had a supermajority. He could have expanded the court if he wanted to keep Roe v. Wade. Didn't expand the court, didn't do anything. He could have codified Roe v. Wade immediately. It didn't happen. It was good for donations, whatever. It's good to keep the right versus left game going on, blah, blah, blah. Ultimately, you've had Joe Biden in office for, I don't know what, coming up on 4 years here. This guy that is literally doing nothing but Republican shit because ultimately, at the end of the day, he's just got a little bit of better bedside manners, but he's still carrying the torch for capital. No matter what. You're dealing with capitalist factions with different goals, but they're not human being, regular people goals. They're not for us. And so rooting for this shit, caring about what they care about, it's just a waste of time. And so to me, when I think about stealing an election and so forth, I don't think that impacts any of us really. I think at the end of the day, what they have done is they've allowed us to become so balkanized, so split up, that we only see these very narrow, this micro slice of like less than 1% difference back and forth. And there's all this room for other things that we need to be talking about, but we won't talk about because we're allowing ourselves to be trapped in a system that's not meant for us, that has nothing to do with us, but they give us these stories. They tell us these stories, get us into rooting interests, like the stuff about we got Rana on here. Oh my God, it's horrible. Oh my God. And hey, did you see they're going to have Rana on there? Oh my God, we're going to have Rana on there. And then that sucks up the air. Meanwhile, climate crisis is still burning up. A genocide is going on that this president, not a Republican, although he is a Republican, this president has been funding single-handedly, pushing through. The same thing with the proxy war in Ukraine. Single-handedly force-feeding this shit down our throats. You get Putin in there, get Russia going here, get UK over there, get fucking Biden over Bush. It doesn't matter. It's the same shit, different day. Oligarch Olympics, they're having their little bickering, has nothing to do with me. It's not my business. I wish it were. I wish I could care about my government. But my government, you're not going to be able to change that. You can't vote your way out of this shit. And so to me, when I hear about this stuff, I think, oh my God, we've got like 5. It's like you have a 20 stop metro and everybody's willing to get off at stop 12 because it's convenient. But they're afraid to go to stop 20 because if they go all the way to the end of the train, they're afraid of what they're going to find out is at the end. And so everybody short sheets the bed, short circuits the process, and never continues to ask, well, hold on, wait a minute. If Joe Biden is funding genocide and not listening to anyone about East Palestine or anything else, but they stole the election or they had to stop the steal. But I mean, what are we really talking about, Jordan? I mean, seriously, what are we really talking about? This is not about whether or not rhetoric A or rhetoric B is good or bad. This is about, it's all a smokescreen. At the end of the day, capital wins. And I can't shake that feeling that we're just constantly wasting our time spinning around this teacup that they've created for us to keep us busy and occupied, squabbling over their nonsense, the fodder they throw out there to keep our eyes off the prize. That's my take. I could be wrong. I don't think I am, but I could be.
And that's why we need a general strike. To be continued. Tell everyone, Steve, where they could find your great work.
Yes, please. Our podcast, Macro and Cheese, it's an audio podcast. It comes out on Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. And then Tuesday nights, that same Macro and Cheese becomes Macro and Chill over at Real Progressives. We have a webinar where we listen together, and my buddy Kami John actually creates a video of the podcast, so you get to see it, talk about it, meet some people. Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And then coming up here in a couple weeks after I fully grieve my mom's death.
1 second. It's Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Where do you go to Macro and Chill?
That is we have a webinar. We do a webinar. We do a Zoom webinar. So you go to our website, realprogressives.org, and then you'll see right there on the front page our calendar. Go to there. You can sign up quickly. There's 30, 40 people in there. It's a lot of fun. We get to talk, get to meet each other. It's an intimate setting. We're trying to train people. We're trying to educate people. We're not just trying to entertain people. We really are hoping we can gird up people with the knowledge to be able to fight back. That's my goal anyway. But then coming up, I'm going to guess around the second week of April. My birthday's April Fool's Day. But about the second week of April, I'm going to try and get the Rogue Scholar started back up, and that'll be Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon Eastern time on Real Progress in Action YouTube channel like you've got up there on the screen. So thank you so much, Jordan, for having me back on. I missed you, brother.
Steve, don't do too much. Self-care is important.
Absolutely. All right, y'all.
Absolutely.
Take it easy, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
So we have a lot more. I want to tell you a quick funny story. So earlier today, I was in New York City. John and I were shooting on Wall Street, actually, for our Flint documentary. For those of you who have watched Status Coup forever and watched me for a while, you know Wall Street was directly involved with poisoning Flint. So we went to the Wall Street Bull, the famous bull that all the tourists want to, take pictures and grab the balls, etc. So I was it's packed because people are online to touch the bull or take photos of the bull. So I was kind of standing on a little, elevated bench, shooting something and pointing, I kept pointing back to the bull. You'll see it in the documentary. And literally 3 attempts in a row of me trying to shoot and point back at the bull. On one end, one time I hit a little kid in the face who doesn't seem to understand I was standing there and there's a camera. So I point backwards and hit a kid in the face. Second time, I hit an elderly woman in the face, which I felt really bad about. Third time, I hit a buffer dude who, gladly didn't kick my ass. But 3 times in a row, people walked in the shot as I was pointing to the bull, and I hit into them. Fortunately, we have that, so maybe we'll make a bloopers version of the documentary. So that was fun. But listen, I am going to implore you, for those who are watching, obviously you could see YouTube seems to be tightening the noose again as far as viewership. But please, if you can, please support us as a member, statuscoup.com/join to support our on-the-ground reporting. We were just in Flint and West Virginia. We are producing a documentary for the Flint 10-year anniversary. I plan on going back to Flint for the 10-year anniversary at the end of April. But frankly, I'm just going to be honest. We're kind of financially right now pretty squeezed. We spent a lot of money recently, not frivolously, on reporting, on the travel. And, YouTube and other mechanisms just are not really helping us get it out to more people. It's kind of becoming more of a systemic problem to be able to fund this on-the-ground reporting that us and I hope appreciate us for, because it takes a lot of money to do this, particularly with myself, a camera person, and to pay all the other costs of Status Coup. If we're not getting people to sign up, I'm just going to be honest, you're not going to see us on the ground as much, because I could only, squeeze as much juice out of the orange as humanly possible before there's no more juice to squeeze. Like right now, I would be I would not be going on the road again for a bit or sending anyone else on the road, because money is tight as far as how much we made when we're on the road. So if we start growing again in terms of getting, if we're on the road and we're getting, 50 new paid signups, that's paid members at $5 to $10 a month, then, it takes a monkey off my back, because we have more recurring revenue coming in and we can afford, these trips. If we're not, I can only fund what the money we have. I mean, it's as simple as that. Another great way is donations. We did get, I haven't counted, but we probably got, what would you say, Colin, in the last, for that trip, maybe $1,500, maybe?
Somewhere around there, yeah. In fact, when you get a chance in the private chat, we got a couple more.
Yeah. So I want to shout out, we got a $100 donation from Amira. So thank you so much. That's great. Very generous. $150 from Chad. Thank you so much, Chad. We did get donations while I was on the road, which helped. It didn't completely offset the costs, but at least gave us a little bit. We got a new Status Coup member at our website. Libby signed up. So thank you, Libby. That's statuscoup.com/join. Yeah, I mean, I could only, if you don't advocate for yourself, no one's going to. And I could only ask you, we're kind of getting it from all ends. YouTube, obviously, certain points, our videos do a lot better and our live streams do a lot better. For some strange reason, certain trips we take, it's like YouTube takes its foot off our neck. And like the UAW strike, we were, going live to 1,000 people. In West Virginia, for whatever reason, YouTube's not sharing it. They're not recommending it. We're going live to 100 people. Obviously, we can't spend thousands of dollars to go on the ground if we're only going live to 100 people. Obviously, we can't spend thousands of dollars to go on the ground if we're not getting people signing up as paid members, or we're not at least getting donations to help us, cover the costs. So please, if you're not a member, consider signing up today, statuscoup.com/join. And if you're already a member, and you want to help us more, donations are very, very much appreciated. We still have some content from the West Virginia trip that we're going to be posting on YouTube. Also, we have a video that I believe is going to be out on Friday on Breaking Point's channel. So hopefully get this reporting out to more eyeballs. Thank you for watching, and we will see you back here tomorrow.